You're listening to the Property Management Excellence Podcast for insights that drive rapid rental growth.
Welcome back. Great to have you with us. Alex Whitlock, a co-founder of Managed here on the PMX podcast. I had the pleasure a couple of weeks ago bumping into a long-standing friend and somebody I've worked with for many years at an event that we were running for the mortgage broking profession. And I thought there was an opportunity to bring some insights, some very, very sharp insights from somebody who's a leader in their field in that respect, because there are certainly parallels that property managers, principals, whether you run sales and property management or whether you're property management only, there are some real correlations between the challenges and the opportunities that good, solid mortgage broking businesses run and property management businesses. There are certainly correlations with the customer. You know, at the end of the day, you're dealing with investors, you're dealing with owners. I'm going to dive into this particular podcast and start to look at some of the areas where I know that my guest can give really, really valuable insights and some practical takeaways for agencies that are focused on growth. There's going to be some things that I'm going to say in this podcast as usual that may rub with some people tuning in. And look, I'm not going to apologize for that. I'm going to say what I think and what I believe. There's going to be some repetitive themes because my guest is also an investor, and he's going to reinforce some of the things that are fairly common in property management. But if we don't bring these things to the fore, next generation agencies are not going to have the opportunity to address them because there is a huge marketplace to be won. And I'm already seeing very, very large advances from agencies that are really getting the customer proposition, the marketing, and the other side of the business, not the doing of property management, but the building a business around the customer. I'm seeing agencies growing quickly, and I'm seeing great satisfaction from their customers. So without further ado, I'm really excited to be back on a podcast again with Jason Back. Jason and I ran a podcast for many years for mortgage brokers, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Jason is the founder of a leading and very highly awarded business called Broker Essentials. He has spent many years working in the field in mortgage broking, and prior to that, many years working in banking. But that's not really why he's good at what he's doing. It's his insight and understanding about building better business models and understanding marketing and communications. On top of that, Jason is an investor. He's a customer, much like myself. He has a portfolio, he buys property, and he's a very straight talking person and is very value focused. Jason, welcome to the show.
Oh, Alex, it's great to be here, and thanks for having me on. I mean, it's an area that I've been involved with, obviously as a customer for many, many years, and it's a complementary industry that we work in, and one that's certainly getting a lot of attention right now as the market goes through some historic changes.
Property management excites me more than any other industry that I've ever had the privilege of working around. I don't work in property management, but as you're aware, I'm a customer. I've also worked with a team that's building software and technology for property managers. But there was, I guess, probably about a year ago, there was a kind of a penny drop moment for me, Jason, that every investment property in your area is always there to be won. And from a business perspective, that is phenomenally exhilarating. And if I was going to go, and if I had my time again, I would very seriously I would be looking at building a rent roll, because I feel that when you can win every property by better understanding your customer and better articulating not what you do, because every PM articulates what they do, lease renewals, finding new tenants, inspections, maintenance, but that's what you get from every PM. This proposition that if you can really connect with the customer, there is a market. It's always there to be won, right? They're always there.
Yeah, I think it's one of those interesting markets, and thinking a lot about the parallels between broking and property management. Again, both highly relationship driven. There's constant pressure from clients, and obviously the client suite that property managers have is multiple people competing demands. Renters, obviously you've got the landlords, but you've also got the principals of the agencies that you work for. So in an increasing commoditization of the underlying service, because as you mentioned before, everyone's competing on the value proposition that they provide great service. But then what does that really look like? I mean, there are other challenges, obviously, with technology disruption coming into all industries. We've got the other challenge with this particular industry being the difficulty in attracting and retaining staff. So yeah, it's a fascinating place, and I think the property managers that win the next sort of tranche of time will be ones that can best communicate their value, and I think that's an area that they've struggled to do over recent years.
So I think, Jason, what would be really valuable for people tuning in before we start having a look at what advice you can provide based on your extremely extensive experience, let's just have a bit of a dive into the world of mortgage broking. And this is an area different to property management, but some similarities. It would be really good for a quick overview of a bit of the landscape of mortgage broking, some of the things that they do badly. And let's remember that mortgage brokers do two things, right, Jason? They do the doing of mortgage broking, working with lenders, assessing borrowing criteria, gathering documentation, which is a parallel in my mind to maintenance requests and all of that type of thing. But then there's the other bit of broking, where a lot of brokers struggle, which is connecting with the customer and articulating a point of difference. So give us a snapshot of what brokers do well, what they do badly, and where the real areas of opportunity lie.
I think, like most industries, I mean, broking's relatively young. It's only sort of been around, circa 35 odd years now. So it's not an overly old industry. But when it comes to the challenge that they've had around their point of differentiation and what they sell, especially over the last decade or so, the broking industry is very much sold on things like rate, which again is not something that the actual brokers control. They can help negotiate it, but it's controlled by the bank. They're a distribution partner for a manufacturer. And the other thing that they really struggle to differentiate themselves away from is that sort of, again, you mentioned it before, that admin, that office admin, document collection, rates, signing bits and pieces, getting and facilitating loans, all that sort of stuff is what clients expect. It's ticket to the dance. They expect you to be an expert in that field. So it's no different from, the property managers. Again, they sell on great service. They've got an experienced team. They're local experts. But the challenge obviously is, again, this point around how you make me feel. With a mortgage, I don't invite people around to, we found our dream home a few years ago. I mean, I've never invited anyone around here to come and check out my mortgage documents. I get them to come and check out the pool and the view of the ocean and, the garage and the driveway and the gardens. And, because that's my attachment. My attachment is to the physical asset that changed my life, not the mortgage itself. And it's a little bit like that with my investment properties. I think property managers sell on we're really good at the admin, we can get maintenance done, we'll get the rent collected on time. But what I really want to know is, how's my property going? How do I feel about you as my trusted connection back to this asset that I'm not allowed to basically even drive by these days, depending on which state you're in. You've got some really complex rules and laws that are very heavily, a lot of time, favouring the tenant. So you're my liege, you're my go-to person for this thing that's worth $1 million or $2 million. So how you make me feel is really important, and I think, again, learning from both of those industries, I think that's an area that needs to be focused more on.
I think a couple of interesting parallels. Mortgage brokers have it must be close to 80% of the market now, something in that region. Property managers, sort of have about 70% of the investment market. And I think anyone that doesn't use a property manager is off their rocker. I've never, ever self-managed a property, and I would never, ever do it. And I would never recommend to anyone out there they should do anything other than use a PM. So that's some similarities there. I think it's also, the doing bit is tough. I spend a lot of time with brokers who get very, very stressed. And here's the thing, you get a lot of brokers that deal with extremely rude and unappreciative customers. And this becomes a bit of a cycle, Jason, because at the end, and it's the same challenge for brokers, if you can't articulate the value of what I'm going to do for you at the beginning, you can ended up getting booted around by very ungrateful customers. I think it's something that PMs suffer. But here's the thing, right? With brokers, you've usually got one or two borrowers. With PMs, they're trying to juggle sometimes unhappy tenants and an unhappy landlord and maybe an unhappy principal, right? Yeah. So it can be a dog of a job, right? But I think rather than sitting here and playing a violin for everything that's tough and difficult, I'd far sooner focus on solutions to start to diminish some of those challenges. And that comes from education, in my opinion. If you've got an educated principal that actually values and understands what the importance is of property management within their business, assuming that they have a sales side as well. You look at PMs that are only doing property management, I can tell you they're very, very aligned. They know exactly what the value proposition is. But if you can educate your owners and your investors about the true value you bring, not the doing and the maintenance and so forth, I think life starts to get a lot easier.
And I think, Alex, I mean, just to build on that, it's again, I think the marketing problem that agencies have, again, is they're marketing the wrong thing. I mean, I think this is more about the experience itself that they need to be pitching. It's a little bit like brokers who pitch, rates and offset accounts and redraws and the functionality of the loans themselves, which when at the end of the day, clients care about two things. They care about, can I have it and when can I have it? So we then don't pitch the outcomes, which is, well, do you want to retire earlier? Do you want to send your kids to private school? Do you want to go to Europe every year on holidays? So we're not pitching the aspirations, we're pitching the functionality, and the functionality is so far away from the customer's actually thinking. So it's a little bit, again, with my experience with my property managers over the years, it's been, I think people get caught up in going, well, how quickly can I get the property rented out? Well, sure, the speed to market's going to be really important. But having the right tenants in that property that stay for 5 years versus turning the tenants over every year becomes actually, is that more important to you? So again, pitching value-based questions that you're asking your clients about what's important to them about having good tenants in the property or having that property marketed and tenanted quickly. Truly understanding the values of what drives your actual client is really, really important. And it can be the same for any of the stakeholders, whether that be the tenant, whether it be the investment property owner, or whether it be the principal of the business. Understanding what drives and motivates people is at the heart of what we do. And that's how we then need to market property management. But at the moment, we manage it like brokers. We pitch it on the practical, and people just don't want to get caught up in the practical anymore.
Before you actually start to educate and work with your customers and start to articulate value, you have, of course, got to attract them. So we're going to take a quick break here, Jason. When we come back, it would be really good to look at some of the things you work on with your clients on the broking side. You work with a lot of mortgage broking businesses. You have done for many, many years. You're also a speaker at events. So yeah, let's dive into some of those tactics when we get back. Welcome back. Great to have you with us, Alex Whitlock, and my good friend Jason back. Diving deep into some of the areas where Jason has added significant value to mortgage brokers over the years and indeed decades. It's also worth noting that whilst I don't own a property management business and never worked in property management, I do own a mortgage broking business, and a fairly significant one. We have our business is getting close to $750 million in terms of a loan book, and I work very, very consistently with the principal of that particular business in marketing, in how we gather. I'm very focused on making sure that we maintain our 4.9 stars that we have in Google reviews. We're on around about 210 for those. And here's the thing, they're very specifically around mortgage broking and the people in the mortgage broking business. And I go through them and they are very clear and very specific. And they are a big funnel, Jason, of business for that particular side of the business. And I know you're familiar with Finny. Mm-hmm. And it's very systematic, and we've got very regular systems in terms of generating more customers to come through. But I can't say the same. I don't work in property management. So what I try and do is apply, look, I've worked in business for many years. I try and apply my principles around common sense in business. And I also use what I experience as a customer. And then I lean on people like you, Jason, who do work in the field. So let's look at mortgage broking now. Let's look at some of the areas that you help brokers, be it individual brokers, be it brokers with a team below them. How do they start to get the message out to bring the customer in so they can educate the customer?
Look, and it's like anything, you mentioned it before, broking's making up circa 81% of the volume being produced in the residential market. So, we've got the lion's share. So now it's, your competition squarely is other brokers. Your competition is, digitized banking offers, fin influencers, everybody's an expert. So it's a highly competitive market out there. And again, no different from property management. And I think when you look at what's making the difference now, especially if you think about the commoditization of the underlying offering, what you get paid to do, the ability for someone to stand out and create a brand and have that sort of that thought leadership, that voice to the markets that you serve is becoming really, really important. Now, again, I think a little bit like what we can learn from like real estate agents is, I think real estate agents over many, many years have done branding and marketing incredibly well. Very comfortable on the front foot, very comfortable telling us how great they are, showing us their results. And it's a really easy line to draw between the results that you get and that particular agent's in the area. It's not a long, it's not a long bow to stretch. So when it comes to mortgage broking and property management, I think it's been harder for them to get cut through with all the noise. They're not sexy industries. They're not at the forefront of, we haven't got the sales sticker out in front of the house. That's generally the real estate agent's domain. But then what about well, now I've got to get this damn thing tenanted. And well, how does that work? Should I manage it myself? Should I get a property manager? And these are decisions when most people haven't gone down this path before, or they've had bad experiences. And I think this is one of the challenges that the property management industry has, is that generally you're coming in at times when there's always problems. So you're about collecting rent, and that's either on time or it's late. You're conducting inspections and there's something broken or needs to be fixed. You're managing arrears. So we've got problematic tenants, and then how does that all play out? You're lodging maintenance requests. So again, there's an issue. So you're in this sort of short triage period all the time when your stakeholders have got a gripe, and it's really challenging. So how do you then tell the world about what it is that you do? And I think this piece around the point of differentiation, just like brokers, is, what's important to the customers. Now, again, like broking, the communication part is incredibly important. And that's not just while you're doing the thing, it's also about the education pre and post. If you're thinking and considering an investment property, not just having your finances important, but getting the right tenant in and a long-term strategy for that property is going to be really important. Certainty is really important. Again, just like broking, just like property management, people don't want volatility. They want certainty in their investment. They want to know that things get paid on time. If there is a problem, someone's going to handle it. Because again, most people don't want to get involved in these things, just like with mortgage broking. Sort this out. Let me know what I need to do. Let's move on to the next thing. So then responsiveness again becomes the issue. So how do you demonstrate responsiveness? Again, mortgage broking has the challenge of how do we demonstrate our expertise and competency when we can't really show case studies on social media for an individual client because of privacy consents. So we've then got to sort of take a little bit of a step back from that. Again, it's the same thing with property management, looking at reviews and Google reviews and how important they are to pretty much all businesses these days. I hate to think that when you go back and look at good property manager reviews, or even with mortgage brokers, that the term that most people use when we've got something approved or when we finally got a tenant or we got a problem solved is that the word that they use is, "Oh, thank God I'm relieved. Oh, thanks, Alex. I'm so relieved we got that sorted." If relief is the best emotion that we can garnish from an experience with our clients, then I think we've got some room to improve. So again, just like, mortgage broking and property management have all these similarities. The whole industry is based on a trust relationship. I'm handing over my most sensitive information to get an outcome that's really important to me. For you then to manage this on an ongoing basis is a huge leap of faith that we have to take in someone. So I think, again, when we demonstrate our expertise, we've got to move away from the administration side of things and the portal access and all those sort of cool things that we think is cool. And we need to get into the shoes and the minds of our customers and think about what's important to them.
I think you hit on many points there, Jason. I'm going to bring something back, and you draw the sort of comparison with brokers and property managers, that brokers compete with brokers, but they used to compete with banks. That was how the industry started out. And there's been this shift now. I saw some very interesting data just probably about a year ago from Agile Market Intelligence that showed the actual now attrition from other brokers to brokers' loan book. But property managers only compete with other property managers. Really, that's you're not competing with anyone else, because the self-managed market, I think you've got people who make their mind up that they're going to self-manage. And I think once you've used a PM, you would never want to manage a property yourself. So you've got this kind of little ecosystem, and so therefore you've got to really look at, in terms of you looking to, and this podcast is all about growth. I want to talk to the agencies, the principals, the teams that see the opportunity and want to grow, be it organically or be it through acquisition. And so if that is your focus, building, first of all, some fundamentals that sort of position you for growth, but then articulating to your marketplace. So if you say what everyone else in property management says about your business, then I'm going to be starting to flip a coin, right? So I think differentiating, when you know that you only compete with other PMs, you've got to articulate something above and beyond. And there's something that I've learned as an investor and a customer of property management is there's investors think they know what they want and need from a property manager, but there's a hidden opportunity that the investor doesn't really know. So you go out and you buy, or maybe you're an owner, maybe you've gone, Jason, and you've been positioned overseas, and so it's a temporary 12, 24 months, and it's not an investment, but I still need to probably pay a mortgage. But for investors, I've bought a property. I don't know what the future holds. The PM has the capacity, as well as fixing things and finding tenants, to be a partner with me over the long term. Now, this is, of course, what good property managers do. I'm not saying they don't do it, but it's about articulating it. So when I turn up looking for a property manager and I think, oh, okay, what's the management fee? I'm looking at all these things that don't really matter. Is it 5%? Is it 6%? Is it 7%? Is it 8%? The reality is it's such a tiny dent in your net return. It doesn't matter. What actually really matters to me as an owner is, am I going to be getting market rent? And does this agency actually understand market rents? They're going to be looking after a very significant asset. Maybe, I've probably got a mortgage. Even if I don't, it's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. What is their actual understanding of asset values, of capital improvements, of managing and being a partner in that asset? Now, there's some property managers and some agencies that absolutely do this. But if you want to differentiate your business, it's about articulating that and educating the owner.
But I think also, Alex, I mean, just from my observations and experiences in that market as well, there's two schools of thought. I mean, obviously there's the property managers that generally sit under large agencies, and I think my experience as a customer of some of those has been, it feels like I'm just an afterthought. I'm in a subdivision that gets a little bit of love here and there. There's a reasonable portal, but it's not their bread and butter. It's good for the agency. It's seen as it's a good ancillary. It's an ongoing annuity stream. And then I've had experience where it's just been a property management firm where they are living and dying by my experience because they've got to go out and win more, clients because they don't have the real estate agency side of their business to prop up their revenue streams. And it's really interesting to see the different behaviors of the two groups and quite frankly, how it makes me feel. I mean, they're responsive, how quickly they are to respond, how they handle complaints, how they communicate bad news. I've experienced a difference in excellence of feeling like a valued client versus feeling like a commodity customer. And again, I think the differentiation between those two for this industry is really important because, again, if I ask questions up front, and you mentioned it before, are you a valued partner that's on the journey with me to help me, grow my wealth and maintain my assets? Or am I a drive-through service that gets the minimum standards done, which is also fine too, but my expectations of you is that I'm not getting anything more or less from that. And I think those that sell on price versus those that sell on value, I think there's a huge differentiator between the two. And I think a lot of managers out there will no doubt they will sell on price. They'll try and undercut from 6% instead of 8%. But what are they really undercutting? You're not asking me the most important question, which is, I actually don't care how much I pay. If you take care of all this and I don't have to think about it, that's worth the extra 2%. And I think sometimes we're finding that if we're just going to compete on price, then it's a race to the bottom, when in fact, what's really important to me is a relationship that reduces my stress about the investment property, deals and meets me where I'm at mentally because of previous experiences, because you've asked about them. You've talked to me about, what I like and what I don't like and how you best communicate with me. And you set up the relationship from the start. I think they're the sort of winning traits of what's going to differentiate those agencies going forward.
There is an enormous opportunity. There really is. And this is not a matter necessarily of the mainstay of property management not being particularly good. Look, it's adequate, certainly, and people work hard. I'm not being disrespectful to that. But this is about really sort of leaning into and recognizing the opportunity, not in doing property management better, but in articulating value better. And the fact that every single management can be won at any one time. All you have to do is persuade the owner that they're going to get a better outcome. that you're more aligned with their goals, and they're very easy. Just takes an email. We're going to take a quick break in a moment, Jason. When we come back, I'm going to give you a little bit of a scenario, just a bit of a sort of a bit of snapshot of an agency that I work with, and I'd like you to sort of build on that to maybe amplify where agencies can build their marketing and build a little bit of evidence about what they do. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Alex Whitlock, Jason back with you. Jason from Broker Essentials, leading trainer and mentor in the mortgage broking field, a good friend and somebody I've had the pleasure of running podcasts with for many, many years. I miss you, Jason. I don't do this. It's been a while since I stepped away from Business Accelerator, but I thoroughly enjoyed that time. Jason, I thought I'd give you a bit of just a bit of a scenario. So I talked to my property manager just recently. Now, this guy's called Grant McKay. He runs an agency called New Management. He is proactive. I bought a property just recently in the very much the lower North Shore. Grant came and met me with the sales agent, and he talked about some of the capital improvements I could make, what we should do to get a better rental yield and so forth. Now, that's fairly unique. But there's another thing with Grant, and I talk to Grant every now and again, and he is so focused on his reviews, and he has 300 plus genuine 5-star reviews. And I've read his reviews because he proactively goes out and he builds those reviews. Now, the advantage for Grant, because he only runs property management, he isn't muddled up with a sales office, because I look at reviews for other agencies, and there's, 10 to every one around the sales side of the business. So you get a bit lost. So that's a standout for me. And there's many other things. He's proactive. He really understands investment. He can talk with comfort about taxation, about negative gearing, about understanding net and gross yields. So he's the real deal for me. And he's somebody he's a trusted partner in my journey. So that's just a little bit of a scenario there for you to sort of consider. In this last section, Jason, I'd like to think about agencies, some practical steps through all of their marketing where they can bring to life and give visibility around a true core offering, on the understanding that they actually deliver on that. What's your recommendations?
Look, I think, again, like broking, in my experience over the last 15 years in broking, even the last 30 plus years in banking, I think we're pitching what we think is important to the customer. So I think about, rent rolls, and I think about routine inspections. I think about rent collection. I think about, managing the maintenance, managing arrears, insurance on the property. Again, I expect all of those things. I expect my manager to be good at them. I don't expect them to be things where they go, hey, we're really good at that. I go, good, because you should be. It's a little bit, again, like mortgage broking when they do loan reviews each year and they get better pricing for their clients. They're getting a lot of brokers saying their clients are not appreciative. And I go, yeah, because they expect you to do it. It's literally the minimum standards now. So I think about, again, as a landlord myself, I think about what I buy on. I buy on things like peace of mind. I buy on a reduced risk profile. So for me, getting them and understanding what my risk profile looks like, what other things are going on in my portfolio, because not all my portfolio is managed by the same property managers. Some are in different states. They have no clue about the other properties that I hold. So getting them really curious about my total position and what my long-term goals are helps them understand then what my risk profile looks like. I mean, people saying, that they want better tenants. Well, what do better tenants actually look like? I think the financial security of a tenant can look like a lot of different things. I might take a tenant that's in one of my properties that I know is going to stick around for 4 or 5 years, but I probably can't increase the rent at a certain rate because I know that could really push them out. But I got to tell you, I'll take stability over changing bloody tenants every 12 months, because then it leaves me a gap of 1 or 2 months. I have to relist and repay and all that sort of stuff. So again, I think we get so focused on things like higher returns at all costs when some of your clients will value stability over high returns. So, and I think, again, when we think about how we position and market a property manager, at the core of it, I want you to reduce my stress. I want you to be doing the things, and this is why I'm outsourcing this work to you, that I don't have the time or knowledge to do. So again, this is not don't pitch me on the routine administration. Pitch me on the emotional connection I have to my retirement. Pitch me on the fact that we're in the background as your support team. Market, effectively don't market your services, market the outcomes that the clients actually want.
I think it's interesting, Jason. I think about the proposition for a broker. I know what I want. I want a mortgage, and I maybe need a mortgage, and that's and I might still behave badly because I tell you, a lot of people are not that nice. That's a reality, and there's lots of reasons why they're not that nice, but let's not go into that right now. The bottom line is that your brokers will get customers that behave badly, but at the end of the day, they want a mortgage. They need a mortgage. They're going to buy a property. I look at the owner investor proposition for a property manager, and it's not as tangible. Yes, I want some rent collecting, yes, I need to have some tenants, but it's not quite as immediate and tangible. It's a slower burning long-term relationship. So I think that the opportunity is for the custodian of that relationship to articulate it, not to go to the sort of the lowest common denominator, which is all the operational stuff. And that's not easy. But here's the thing, right, Jason, and this isn't, unique to property management. Everything across the board is generally so underwhelming, right? Yeah. And you think about, you go in and out of shops and it's very mediocre and you wander about, but every now and again you have an experience where somebody blows your mind and they're so memorable. I'll give you a scenario, right? I was getting lunch in North Sydney the other day, and I went to a little noodle bar that I'd never seen before. I usually stop at the one before, which is wonderful, by the way. And I thought, and the queue was too long, and I went in there, and the people in the bar were so quirky and so nice and so polite, and the food was so good. I went away and I got my daughter and I brought her back, and I go there very regularly now because they stood out.
Yeah.
They stood out. Now, the reality is, if you can stand out with your customers, people talk. They just talk, and now this isn't about being polite and lovely and just doing niceties. I think if there are opportunities to add value to people in their very complicated lives, very needy lives, it is a beacon of light, and people talk and share.
I think that's from a coaching question, and I would ask this of any of my clients, which might be something along the lines of, getting the property manager to reach out to their clients. And it can be both the tenants who generally are aspirational property owners as well at one stage, but all of their stakeholders, and ask that question. So what do you need from me right now? And it might be, you mentioned it before, I had a property manager in South Australia a few years ago that came to me with some ideas around it was what I would call a duplex. I'm not sure what they call them. It was a side-by-side thing. I'm not sure. South Australia has probably a different definition.
The same.
And they'd come out and said, hey, look, the one next door has been renoed. We know we've got some pictures of it. And that's, hey, here's a bit of an idea that you could do with yours. We've gone away and got some quotes, wanted to get your thoughts. We've also, we're happy to speak to the tenant because obviously you need to do some stuff with the kitchen, the bathroom and stuff. And what I loved about it was just proactive. It's not that I hadn't thought about it. I'd love to get a better price if I was to sell that property, but I haven't got the bandwidth for it. So they'd taken up the bandwidth for me. They'd come to me saying, hey, this is what's happening in the area. It was down in Glenelg South. It's a great area. It's continuing to grow. We think this is what you could do with this property. And we can go effectively and go and organize it for you. I'm like, that's exactly what I want to hear. I don't want to have to get involved. I want you guys to sort it out. I want you to be my partner in this. And I think moving away from, again, that transactional being just a good property manager to being a really effective communicator and understanding what's important to me. Because great property managers, being a great property manager gets you retained, but great communication gets you chosen. And I think that's probably the big difference between the two. We've got this industry that people just don't know about because they haven't had this voice. They don't stand out, a little bit like mortgage brokers. I do a lot of conferences in both worlds. You go to a real estate conference and it's high fives and fast cars and, hugs and handshakes, and there's lots of pretty excitable people. You go to a mortgage broking, conference, and we're all there with our calculators and we're all sort of, beavering away, and we don't know how to stand out in a really busy, marketplace. And I think brand management's really important because brand's what people say about you when you're not in the room. So I think that's what you've got to be thinking about. How do your clients speak about you when you're not in front of them? Do they roll their eyes? Do they just feel like you're another commodity? Or do they go, they're an invaluable part of Team Jason, right? They're part of my team that's driving my wealth, that's helping me reduce debt, that's managing my portfolio. And I think if people talk about you like that, that's a foundation for long-term success.
My belief, and I'll sort of close off here, Jason, my belief is the difference between being good and being great in property management is not as big as people think.
Yeah.
Because the reality is the hard work that property managers deliver, is there's very few that do it badly because it's a very compliant industry,
Yeah.
but it isn't going to mean that you grow your business fast.
Yeah.
So the difference between being good and great for me is, of course, do all those things. And I have the pleasure of work with property managers as a customer for many years. I spend time with property managers now. I get to talk to them a lot, and they're all good people. They all care. But to be great is to have that, but to go the step further. And this is a cultural thing. It's not down to individual people. You can't be an isolated property manager that gets so excited about listening to what I'm saying with no support from within the agency. It has to be top down.
Yeah.
Principal has to believe in this. And I had a chance to catch up with a CEO of an agency which is just breaking into the Melbourne market called Housemark, very successful up in Queensland, 3 offices up there. Natalie South, who's the CEO, she says, she goes, we are telephone first. That is our proposition. So, and they bring a breath of fresh air. And I'm not saying they've got the perfect model, but I think they give an example to agencies that want to grow of how they differentiate themselves from the rank and file. The rank and file is fine, but fine isn't good enough if you want to be a growth agency. So
can I just say, Alex, with that as well, to keep in mind that, and team, go out and Google this, because I think this is one of the most genius pieces of marketing I've seen in the last 30 odd years. There was an ad many, many years ago. It was a H&R Block ad, and it had a lady sort of sitting at a computer in the dark, and she was giving this little fist pumping action, yes. And they go, oh, this is Karen. She's from H&R Block. She's just found her client another tax deduction. And it was just this perfect little thing of going, yeah, sometimes the thing that we do isn't super sexy. It's work in the background, but our job is to be, again, we might be in the background getting those great results. It doesn't have to be sort of all flashy sometimes, but that's what customers expect from us. And again, I'd encourage you to go and have a Google that ad, because you can still find it quite easily. And just think again about, if I haven't got the big for sale sign that I can market as my pitch, then how do I pitch? Again, pitching to me as a consumer, for me, is about making sure I've got a team around me that understands me, that knows my pain points, that when they ring, and to your point, Alex, again, we know that the agents, there's a particular demographic, very heavy text heavy. I don't want to see a text on my phone from my property manager a lot of the time, because I always think it's bad news. I'd love to be able to reverse that. When I see their name, their name comes up as a call, I'm excited because it's probably something they're excited to tell me about, versus I'm always linked to a negative anchor. I think we've got to really think about that. Hey, we've got a positioning problem as well in the market, that every time we call, it's a problem. So I'd get you all to a bit of a think about what that looks like. And you don't solve that by a text or an email. You solve that by having a good relationship with your clients.
Jason, solid gold. Everything that you've brought to this podcast, I'm so familiar with your position, but I hear new things every time we catch up. Really, really valuable. Thank you for taking time to catch up. And look, hopefully we'll get you on here again some point.
Absolute pleasure, Alex, as always.
For everyone else, thank you so much for tuning in. I believe that there has never been a better time for growth in property management. Believe me, the marketplace, I spend a lot of time on the investor side. There is real fear out there, I can tell you, gang, amongst investors with existing properties, investors that are coming into the marketplace. There has never been a better time for what I believe to be the true custodian and the true partner in terms of asset growth, which is the property manager, to step up and to be present and to really move into that position as being a trusted partner with investors and owners, because it's looking really bleak. You're looking at a situation now where in many markets, you're going to get very little capital growth. So yield, and as Jason had touched on, actually understanding the true value of running a good rental property with solid tenants, educating owners about the value of retaining good tenants has never been greater. Have the courage to engage with your customers and owners. They will change very quickly from being rude and abrasive in some instances to being putty in your hands when you give them value. I'll leave you with that thought. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next week.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.